questions. Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was reported back in March that the most recent test of immersion programs in New Brunswick indicated a very low success rate amongst high school students. Students who would have started French immersion in grade 1. Only 1 in 10 students in grade 12 made it far enough in immersion to take the oral French proficiency test. Just 632 out of 6,233 Anglophone students. Even worse, the test showed the majority of those 632 teenagers did not meet the province's goal of speaking French at a high enough level. This is evidence from the very program the Premier wishes to return. It was not achieving the desired results. The kind of evidence one uses when making an informed, rational decision. This Premier committed to evidence-based decision-making in his platform. Why won't the Premier wait for the evidence from the grade 3 entry point before pushing ahead with this irresponsible change? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is right. During the campaign in our platform, we committed to making sure that we base our decisions on the best evidence we can possibly find, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to argue that we also committed to restoring French immersion to grade 1 during the campaign, Mr. Speaker. So what I would like to point out is we are doing both these commitments. We have announced that we'll be restoring French immersion to grade 1 by the next school year. And Mr. Speaker, it's based on evidence, it's based on a report, it's based on consultations that were done in 2012. Mr. Speaker, the opposition is still trying to say that this is all coming as a big surprise. We've been discussing this for over 5 years as a province, Mr. Speaker. A report that was very detailed, inclusive and exhaustive, recommended grade 1 as the entry point for French immersion back in 2012, and in 2014 we'd made the commitment to restore it to grade 1. So this should not come as a surprise. We're going to get it done, and done the right way, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is what happens. A platform promise that trumps evidence and having a real plan to implement. The irresponsible change from grade 3 to one that will have the following impact on the Anglophone education system. The Anglophone system will have to deal with French immersion in grade 1, French immersion at grade 3 for 2 years, grandfathering of current grade 3 entry-level students, intensive French at grade 5, late immersion at grade 6, plus compulsory French from grade 3 to grade 10, with experiences in French at grade 1 and 2 and electives in French at grade 11 and 12. Has the Gallant government considered these numerous scenarios and what they are doing, and have they planned to put a plan in place to manage this? Mr. Speaker, if we don't get the teachers involved in this process, we will not be able to achieve success. Please ask the teachers how to make this work. Will the Premier please engage the classroom teachers? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Premier.
Monsieur le Président, nous avons fait ça lorsque nous avons développé nos plans d'éducation, lorsque nous avons développé notre plateforme comme un parti politique, lorsque nous sommes en train d'essayer d'avancer nos systèmes d'éducation dans la province. Nous sommes toujours en train de consulter les enseignants, enseignantes, éducatrices et éducateurs. Monsieur le Président, qu'est-ce que je ne comprends pas ce matin? C'est pourquoi que le chef de l'opposition concentre seulement sur ce sujet. Monsieur le Président, pourquoi qu'il essaie de dire qu'il est surpris? Est-ce qu'il n'a pas vu qu'on avait mis ça comme un engagement de notre plateforme? Est-ce qu'il n'a pas vu qu'il y avait un rapport qui a été fait en 2012 sur ce sujet qui faisait la recommandation d'avoir l'immersion en français précoce en première année? Est-ce qu'il n'a pas vu les discussions qui se sont passées pour bien des années dans la province concernant l'immersion? So, Mr. Speaker, I have to ask the member opposite, why is he so surprised this is happening when it's based on the evidence of a report that was commissioned by his government?
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, commitment in a platform is one thing, but having the when to do this, what's the timing is right, having the evidence to support it, knowing that it's the right thing to do for the teachers, having the real facts that support the decision should be paramount in any discussion, in any decision. And unfortunately, that doesn't appear to be the case. I'm not standing here with my own views. I'm standing here from the views I'm getting from classroom teachers. Dr. Aaron Squire shared some important information in November 12th CBC online article. I will send the link to the Premier. Dr. Schreier noted that the children lacking sufficient reading skills at the end of grade 1 have an 88% likelihood of remaining below grade level after 3 additional years of instruction. Bear this in mind when considering the latest reading assessments. 88%. In this article, Dr. Squire shared 3 ways to boost our low and declining literacy rates. These are the discussions that should be occurring. How to fix the system so our children get the education they need and deserve. We have not heard from the Minister responsible for literacy. Perhaps the Minister responsible for literacy can tell us what has become
The Honourable Premier.
Since we find ourselves on the 6th or 7th day that the Leader of the Opposition is questioning the policy regarding French immersion, questioning where we're basing or what we're basing this decision on, I have to ask the Leader of the Opposition to tell us why the report that was done in 2012 that was sanctioned by his government when he was the Minister of Finance does not hold water with him. What is the problem with that report? The report had stated that it talked to educators, leaders, experts, parents, teachers. Mr. Speaker, it was an exhaustive and inclusive process. The Leader of the Opposition seems to want to pretend that that report does not exist. Can he please tell the people of New Brunswick why we should not be following the recommendation by the nonpartisan and independent commission that his government sanctioned, Mr. Speaker?
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the report asked the question, when is the right time to learn to have the best language proficiency results? And would the earlier the better? That may be the case, and that was the question asked. It wasn't asked, what impact do all of the other classes, the other courses have when we do that? So let's think of how we could differentiate in order to get the best of both. Classroom teachers have the ability to help us give our children the education system they need and deserve. Classroom teachers know what must be fixed. They know because they live it every day. They have a unique perspective and understanding, not attainable by anybody else. But they can't share this knowledge because they fear for their careers. They can't speak out honestly and openly because they are civil servants. If the Premier cares about fixing the education system, will he agree to work with me to find a way for our classroom teachers to share their knowledge and wisdom? If the words of the throne speech are true and education is a real priority, the Premier will work with me on this. Is the Premier willing to find a way to give our classroom teachers the voice they need? Thank you.
The Honourable Premier.
Monsieur le Président, depuis notre mandat et même avant notre mandat, Monsieur le Président, nous sommes toujours en train de consulter les enseignantes, enseignants, éducateurs, éducatrices et les leaders communautaires qui veulent nous donner leurs idées et préoccupations concernant l'éducation. Monsieur le Président, ça se fait déjà. What I do not understand, Mr. Speaker, is why is it that the Leader of the Opposition has gone through a leadership for his political party, has finally taken the reins of his caucus, Mr. Speaker, and of his party, and all he wants to talk about is French immersion. Is that why he wanted to become the Leader of the Opposition? For 6 or 7 days straight, all we have talked about is French immersion. Does he not have any questions regarding the economy? Does he not have any questions regarding health care? Well, maybe he doesn't because we've protected health care, protected rural hospitals, and he doesn't want to talk about cutting them. And maybe he has no questions about the economy because we grew the economy by working with New Brunswickers at record rates in 2015.
Leader of the Official Opposition. Leader of the Official Opposition.
Record rates directly related to the oil and gas industry and the forestry sector. And I would ask the Premier, what did he do to help either one of those causes? I believe in getting results on issues, not turning the channel every time the going gets tough. And that's why education needs our best, because our kids are suffering because of it. The Premier and the Education Minister have claimed that principals were engaged and consulted, but the story we are being told is quite different. We are told the discussion opened in grade 1 entry point for immersion at the provincial meeting, at the province's provincial meeting. The Deputy Minister and the Ministers glibly stated the ship has sailed on that. Was a very bitter pill for a lot of administrators to share, or to swallow. And the climate in the room changed dramatically as a result. That's not consultation, that is dictation. Of course, principals can't speak out on this anymore. They can openly and honestly share their ideas in the back room, but not in public. Here's another group we should hear from an open session. Does the Premier want to make this happen? Will he meet with me next week during recess?
Time.
And let's fix it.
The Honourable Premier.
Président, j'ai déjà expliqué pourquoi que nous avons fait la décision concernant l'immersion en français précoce. Nous avons déjà expliqué comment que nous sommes toujours en train de consulter avec les enseignantes et enseignants, bien sûr les éducateurs et éducatrices autour de la province. Mr. Speaker, I find it interesting. The Leader of the Opposition that said he would try to do things differently. He wants to get up and blame us for everything, Mr. Speaker, that is a challenge in the province, but won't give any credit to us if there's something going good. That's okay, Mr. Speaker, because leadership is about taking taking blame, but also making sure that we share the credit. And I know that New Brunswickers, businesses in our province, job creators, innovators, entrepreneurs have worked so hard, Mr. Speaker, to buck the trends that we see nationally, that in 2015 we had record growth because many sectors, many businesses worked extremely hard to make sure that we were able to grow at a 2.3% rate, the third best in Canada and the best in New Brunswick since 2004.
Leader of the official opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we could talk a lot about the rationale and the reasons for that economic change, and I mentioned the two primary ones. However, I want to give the government credit for commencing and building on a plan for education. You know, we started a plan, but you're putting it into a 10-year plan, a longer look at how our education be. I absolutely applaud that. So let's not lose it. Let's not, out of the gate, start out by saying, oh, I'm very focused on a 10-year plan and stability in the education system, and then, oh, by the way, here's a platform promise I want to implement, and you guys figure out how to do it, because I don't really have a plan. That's where we're coming off the rails. Teachers are saying it is throwing our system in chaos, a system that has been in chaos, government after government. I'm not sitting here and saying we did it right. But let's not lose the momentum of a 10-year plan. Let's sit down, and Premier, I ask again, I would love to meet with you next week during recess. I'd like to talk through this. We can fix the education for our kids. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, one thing we can agree on is that they didn't get it right. Mr. Speaker, the former Minister of Finance's approach of cutting into education, cutting into services, is what gotten us where we are today, Mr. Speaker, with the economy struggling in the province. But luckily, in 2015, New Brunswickers worked hard. New Brunswickers made sure that they rolled up their sleeves and they would buck the trends nationally, increasing the GDP at record amounts. The best increase since 2004 in New Brunswick, and the third best in Canada when it came to economic growth in 2015. And why did that happen, Mr. Speaker? Because we're working with job creators. We're making sure they have the capital they need. We're making sure that we support them by fostering innovation. We're making sure that we're going to invest in the infrastructure with the Trudeau government that our businesses need to be able to compete on a global scale and stimulate the economy in the short term, creating much needed jobs for New Brunswickers. And last but not least, Mr. Speaker, we're investing in developing a skilled workforce through education and training.
Member for Hampton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reckless rush to change early immersion from grade 3 to 1 just keep getting worse by the day. Already parents are worried over what they'll be forced to decide. They've been worried from the day the Premier made this announcement. Now we're learning in the last few days that the next few days, regarding early immersion decision, kindergarten children are having their first progress report going home. I believe in some cases Monday, information on Wednesday, and the forms have to be back by December the 13th, before Christmas, which regards the next 12 years of education made in a very short time. Can the Minister of Education justify how he's going to ask the parents of these kindergarten-age children to make this decision?
The Honourable the Premier.
Président, encore une fois, je pense qu'on est rendu sur la 7e période de questions où nous avons expliqué comment on est venu à la décision de ramener l'immersion précoce en français à la première année. Nous avons expliqué comment nous sommes toujours en train de consulter les enseignantes, enseignants, éducateurs, éducatrices et les leaders communautaires concernant leurs idées et leurs préoccupations envers notre système d'éducation. Monsieur le Président, nous avons aussi dit que nous ne sommes pas d'accord avec l'opposition. Nous, on pense qu'il faut investir davantage en éducation. Le chef de l'opposition aimerait qu'on coupe en éducation, mais cela, ça ne sera pas notre approche, Monsieur le Président. And I have to say, when it comes to French immersion, Mr. Speaker, we've made the rationale very clear. We've explained how we came to the decision years ago, Mr. Speaker, to make that our position. It's based on a report that was commissioned by the then Minister of Finance and his government to look at French immersion. But, Mr. Speaker, to finalize our arguments, I quote the member opposite asking the questions, earlier is better.
Member for Hampton.
Mr. Speaker, it isn't just parents that are worried and sick about the selfish change the Gallant government's making to early immersion. There are a lot of classroom teachers as well. They're very shocked by this announcement from the Premier and the Education Minister. It's happened early this year, and a lot of undue stress for both parents and teachers. The teachers are worried about their jobs. It's not just about they're not just worried about their friends as well. They've seen too many people move away, and last week the Minister of Education stated that internal staffing numbers, he knew what these numbers were in dialogue with my colleague from Oromocto Lincoln. The minister might as well start opening up about this surprise announcement. The question is, how many classroom teachers do his internal numbers tell him will lose their jobs because of this change?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I just don't understand how the opposition is going to continue on the argument this is a surprise. In 2012, Mr. Speaker, there was a report commissioned by the previous government to look at French immersion that recommended grade 1 as the entry point for French immersion. Mr. Speaker, that was 4 years ago. In 2014, we made a campaign promise that we would restore French immersion to grade 1. Mr. Speaker, this is a subject that actually has been discussed for many years. It was discussed during the 2010 campaign when the then Conservative Party promised to restore French immersion to grade 1. So I would ask the members opposite to stop pretending that this is a surprise. The only surprise is that there's actually a government that is making sure that they fulfill their platform commitments. The previous government did no such thing. Mr. Speaker, we are going to invest in education, we are going to invest in our youth, and we've already made it clear we'll do everything we can to mitigate some of the legit concerns that people had when the system was, back in the day, in grade 1, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Hampton.
Mr. Speaker, as you know, the teachers and administrators, even school officials, district officials, are going against this. They don't believe it's the time. They'd like to see the grade 3 entry point go through a complete cycle. We discussed it for the last few weeks. And the throne speech says listening, getting things done. Well, people aren't listening. They're not taking it in. The last 2 weeks, the superintendents of Anglophone West and Anglophone South, half of the Anglophone districts in the province, regarding the decks, have come out. Regarding the change to immersion, it's not the time. One of the bigger concerns is regarding resources and qualified classroom teachers to be put in place by next September 2017. The question raised is, where does the government think they're going to find these qualified teachers? The Atlantic government is planning on some current classroom teachers losing positions. We also know that the New Brunswick classroom teachers are looking for work, and some are moving away, but they're not qualified, the ones that are staying to do the French immersion program. Where will the government find the qualified teachers to replace them? Out of the province, no doubt, but where?
The Honourable Premier.
It really is unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, to hear the opposition not only criticize our education system and indirectly criticizing our educators by calling the system broken. Now they're actually questioning the qualifications of our teachers, Mr. Speaker. They're questioning the qualifications of those who are studying in education that would like to be here in the province, Mr. Speaker. Well, we believe in the teachers of our province. We believe in the future teachers of our province, and we believe in our education system. Are there challenges? Yes, Mr. Speaker. And that's why we worked with teachers and other educators and other community leaders to develop 2 strong education plans that will give our youth the education they need and deserve. And let's contrast that with what the Leader of the Opposition did when he was the Minister of Finance. They had no education plans. They cut into education, Mr. Speaker, all the while having the worst economic growth we have seen in a generation. Well, Mr. Speaker, we've cut the deficit, we've invested more in education and healthcare, and we've grown the economy in just 1 year.
Member for Southwest Miramichi Bay Devin.
Mr. Speaker, there are a great many natural gas users with questions about the Gallant government's recent deal with Enbridge. I would like to ask the Premier first about the involvement of Len Hoyt. On September 29th, members of the civil service were summoned to listen to the Premier speak about deliverology. At that meeting, Len Hoyt's name was flashed on the screen alongside the Premier's as co-deliverologists. Mr. Hoyt's name also appeared on the infamous Hot Button Issues email, and Mr. Hoyt was identified as a member of the Premier's transition team. In a CBC story dated in November 2014, Len Hoyt is identified as the lead lawyer for Enbridge Gas. Would the Premier care to comment on the optics of these facts?
The Honourable Minister of Energy and Resource Development.
Mr. Speaker, in the provincial legislature, I don't think we're going to get into HR issues here. If the member wants to talk about that in a private nature with his own members, I think there's an opportunity there. But Mr. Speaker, I think to point out our priorities are investment in education, healthcare, Mr. Speaker, and those are priorities in job creation at the same time. Mr. Speaker, we just settled an agreement. We just settled a lawsuit. $820 million, Mr. Speaker. There's not many New Brunswickers that know about this, Mr. Speaker. $820 million. Had we lost that lawsuit, Mr. Speaker, it would have to be booked right away. Right away, Mr. Speaker. And I heard the member opposite yesterday in his member statement say it's a bad deal for New Brunswickers. This was a bad deal for New Brunswickers. I beg to reason on this side, Mr. Speaker. $820 million lawsuit that is now gone, Mr. Speaker. I think it's a good deal for the taxpayers of this province, Mr. Speaker. Absolutely a good deal for the people of this province. Every man, woman, and child were going to be on the hook for this lawsuit, Mr. Speaker.
That's got to be time, Minister. Recognize the member for Southwest Miramichi Bay Devin.
Mr. Speaker, sounds like cronyism to me. And quite contrary to the new approach. Patronage, Mr. Speaker, alive and well. This deal the Gallant government has made alongside Len Hoyt with Enbridge does not seem to have the best interests of the taxpayers of New Brunswick or the gas customers of Enbridge in mind. New Brunswick's public intervener Heather Black says there's nothing in this new deal that prevents gas rates from rising in the near future. The deal the Gallant government is trying to make actually removes guaranteed price protection for consumers. Why would the government take the protection for consumers off in this deal? Can the Premier or the Minister explain the benefits for gas customers for removing their guaranteed price protection?
Minister of Energy and Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hear doom and gloom on that side of the House constantly. And, Mr. Speaker, he made mention of I've been listening to some of the interviews lately, and he mentioned Heather Black. Well, Mr. Speaker, it's kind of interesting on a news release, because I was wondering who Heather Black was. I wanted to get a bit of an understanding of it. 7 days before the writ was dropped, Heather Black was appointed to this position as or public intervener for the province of New Brunswick. It's a newly created office of the Public Energy Advocates. Mandate is to represent the public interest in energy matters, not the interests of any particular customer class, interest group, or provincial government department. That's kind of interesting, because I heard cronyism over there, over here, Mr. Speaker. But I got to tell you something, Mr. Speaker. Come to find out, Heather Black is the sister-in-law of the MLA for Fredericton York. So, Mr. Speaker, when they want to talk about cronies, I don't understand what their methodology is and what their thought process.
Minister. Member for Southwest Miramichi Bay Devin.
Mr. Speaker, New Brunswick's public intervener says starting in 2020, the main message is there's no longer going to be rate setting for those customers based on the idea of saving them money compared to electricity. The Premier naturally avoided the question when he was asked by the media what will happen when the rate caps are gone. Of course, there's no good answer. Rates can skyrocket. The public intervener highlighted a part of this deal involving the deferral account that appears to handcuff the Energy and Utilities Board when the company applies to hike gas rates. Looks like a bad deal. Was it Len Hoyt who negotiated this deal on behalf of the people of New Brunswick? Was it Len Hoyt? What's in it for Len Hoyt? We wonder. The public wonders too.
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it just keeps on going back and forth here. But fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, it's the Energy and Utilities Board that we have faith in that's going to come to a conclusion on this, Mr. Speaker. As an example, NB Power had requested a 2% rate increase. What did they get? 1.7%, Mr. Speaker. But let's talk about this $820 million lawsuit. Not many New Brunswickers know about it, but the lawsuit has been dropped, Mr. Speaker. It's gone. The lawsuit is gone. It is not on the backs of every single New Brunswicker that whether they use gas or not, Mr. Speaker. It is now gone. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, it seems that on this side we have to clean up the messes of these people constantly. The billion-dollar cost overrun of LaPro, Mr. Speaker. Let's talk about the $900 million at Colson Cove, Mr. Speaker. And I know it's a voodoo in the room. They don't want to talk about it. The $150 million they committed us to on Harbour Bridge, Mr. Speaker. It's just an ongoing cycle, Mr. Speaker.
Some Minister. I will call time. The Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we're fast approaching the First Ministers' Conference taking place December the 9th, where the Prime Minister Trudeau, has invited each of the premiers from across the country to negotiate and finalize a pan-Canadian climate strategy. Mr. Speaker, this will be a game-changer for all Canadians and all New Brunswickers.
Don't know when they start.
This represents a real opportunity for New Brunswick to leverage federal support in our transition to a low-carbon economy, which will create transformational growth for our small towns and rural communities. Can the Premier tell this House if he will attend the First Minister's Conference?
The Minister of Local Government. I'm sorry, we don't do point of orders during question period. Recognize the Minister of Local Government.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Il n'y a aucun doute que le député d'opposition, le député d'en face, est très intéressé par la question sur les changements climatiques, tout comme nous d'ailleurs, comme gouvernement. J'ai eu l'occasion de répondre à cette question la semaine dernière et de dire à quel point c'était un des grands défis de notre siècle, faire face au changement climatique. Et j'ai un peu de difficulté à comprendre. Vous savez, on a reçu 85 recommandations du comité spécial de l'Assemblée législative. Nous sommes en train d'étudier et on sait très bien que oui, il y aura une rencontre au début décembre de l'ensemble des premiers ministres de la province et le but, c'est de faire progresser cette question de lutter contre les changements climatiques. Nous travaillons présentement à améliorer, à renforcer le plan sur les changements climatiques et donc le travail est en train de faire. Et si jamais le député d'en face est insécure par rapport à cette question-là, je peux lui confirmer qu'on travaille très très fort et que oui, nous aurons un plan renforcé et que ce plan-là vise à...
Prime Minister, Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question was very simple. It was directed to the Premier, and it was a question about whether or not the Premier plans to attend this First Minister's Conference that Prime Minister Trudeau will be hosting on December the 9th to discuss and finalize the pan-Canadian climate change strategy. So will the Premier attend the First Minister's Conference?
The Honourable Premier.
Yes. I appreciate the question, Mr. Speaker. If there's other questions about my schedule, I'd be very happy to answer the member opposite. Again, what my colleague just said, I'll repeat that. I think it's important to note. We care very much about playing our role to combat climate change. Prime Minister Trudeau has made it very clear that as a country we all need to step up, and that includes the provinces and includes all individuals. So we all have to work together to make sure we have the best plan possible to combat climate change, all the while ensuring that we're going to grow the economy. Mr. Speaker, transitioning to a low-carbon economy is a priority for the country, and it's something that we're going to step up to do. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the meetings in which the member opposite references. We're going to have good discussions, I'm sure. We have, as my colleague mentioned, 80 or so recommendations that have been brought forward by a nonpartisan committee of the legislature. We look forward to going through all of them in detail and continuously discussing how we're going to advance our plan to combat climate change. And we're going to make sure we do it right and take the time necessary to be able to have the best plan possible for New Brunswick's economy and for climate change, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The transition to a low-carbon economy, in fact, presents endless opportunities for transformational growth in our small towns and rural communities. This First Minister's Conference is the perfect opportunity for our Premier to pitch New Brunswick as the living lab for transitioning to this new economy. Will the Premier commit to reporting back to this House the outcome of the First Minister's Conference following the December 9th meeting?
The Honourable Premier.
Monsieur le Président, bien sûr, je vais donner une mise à jour aux Néo-Brunswickoises et Néo-Brunswickois de ce qui va se passer lors de la réunion qui s'en vient avec le Premier ministre Trudeau et bien sûr mes collègues Premiers ministres autour du pays. On fera ça, Monsieur le Président, la journée même à travers des médias, j'ai aucun doute. Monsieur le Président, bien sûr, la prochaine fois que je vais me trouver dans l'Assemblée législative, j'espère avoir des questions concernant la rencontre. Alors ça me fera plaisir de répondre à ces questions et faire certain que tous les Néo-Brunswickois et Néo-Brunswickois sont au courant de ce qui se passe lorsque ça vient au sujet important de combattre les changements climatiques. And what's important, Mr. Speaker, is that we work with all New Brunswickers to ensure we have the best plan possible to transition to a low-carbon economy, meaning that we have to step up to combat climate change, but all the while, Mr. Speaker, ensuring that there's economic growth in New Brunswick. And I can tell you that we're very pleased of what job creators and New Brunswickers have done in 2015 with the record economic growth we saw here in New Brunswick.
Member for Fredericton York.
Mr. Speaker, according to October figures released by Statistics Canada, there are 39,100 New Brunswickers who are out of a job and looking for work. Of course, that figure does not include those who have given up looking or those who are underemployed. 39,100 jobs are needed in our province, a province with the highest taxes in North America. Business property tax has increased, income tax has been hiked, HST is up, workers' comp rates are going up a whopping 33%, and the government is hungrily promoting a carbon tax. What message does the Premier have for 39,100 New Brunswick citizens who need a job right now?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, we understand the opposition doesn't think that we should do anything for climate change. Mr. Speaker, we understand that they don't support our plan to give free tuition to those that need the most support in the province, Mr. Speaker. They don't support our plan to increase the minimum wage, giving the workers the money that they need to be able to have a good quality of life. They don't support enhancing the CPP, making sure that future generations will be able to retire here in New Brunswick with a good quality of life. And they don't support raising taxes on the 1% richest of New Brunswickers so we can invest more in education and health care. But, Mr. Speaker, we do support those things. And by investing in New Brunswickers, by moving progressive policies and ensuring that we, day after day, focus on economic growth, we're getting results. The stats I'm interested in that aren't doom and gloom like the member opposite always focuses on, in 2015, the economy in New Brunswick grew by 2.3%. It's the best economic growth in New Brunswick since 2004, and it's the third best in the country, only behind British Columbia and Ontario, Mr. Speaker.
Time for question period has expired.